In the early 1960s, roughly 13% of people were considered obese by the CDC guidelines. Recent figures suggest that a current national obesity rate is close to 43%. What should be done to the food supply?
Well, the first thing to do is get the government out of the food business. Everything that the government tells us to eat is bad. I mean, the USDA has just come out with a statement that that Cheerios and Fruit Loops are more nutritious than beef. America now leads the world in non-infectious chronic morbidity. That's not a place to be number one.
The U.S. has the third biggest agricultural sector in the world. As the new Trump administration starts to unfold, what will happen to the future of the American agricultural sector? Joining us to discuss this issue today is an expert on agriculture, and he is Joel Salatin, author of several books, including Everything I Want to Do is Illegal and Pasteurized Profit. He's the host of Beyond Labels podcast, and he's a co-owner of the Polyface Farm. You can check out our last interview with Joel from last year, where he talked about the future of food prices. Welcome back to the show, Joel. Good to see you again.
Thank you, David. Likewise.
Food isn't going to be unaffordable now, is it?
Isn't going to be unaffordable? I think
it was for a period of time for a lot of people in 2021, 2022. And I think the issue is whether or not that people are afraid of that happening again.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about food prices is that we're not just in a U.S. system. There's very much a global, a lot of countries produce food. And so it's not just what happens in the U.S., but I can assure you that in the U.S., there is a growing interest in, I'm just going to say, eating better, wellness foods. The social dysfunction of our time is driving people to want to buy better, to buy different, to buy more nutrient density. And so the demand for things like, raw milk and pastured poultry and grass-finished beef and compost-grown tomatoes has never been higher. And so along with price, I mean, shoppers have always, shopped based on price, but more and more now, price is becoming secondary to quality.
Okay. Well, let's come back to the quality of the food in just a minute. This raises the question as to whether or not Trump's tariffs could have any impact on the agricultural sector. Let's take a look at my screen now, Joel. I'm going to show you an article from Reuters. I'll just read you the first paragraph here. Trump's tariff threat puts U.S. farm exports to China at risk. Chinese imports of U.S. farm goods, which have slowed since the trade war during Donald Trump's first presidential term, could be hit again if tariff hostilities resume when he returns to office in January, experts say. China remains the biggest market for U.S. agricultural products, despite a decline in imports since 2018 after Beijing slapped tariffs up to 25% on soybeans, beef, pork, wheat, corn, and the issue here, Joel, is whether or not retaliatory tariffs from China could hurt American farmers. What do you think?
Well, I think it certainly could hurt the commodity farmers, but I don't think it'll hurt farmers like me at all, where we direct market into the domestic market. A lot of people don't realize right now, yes, America is known as an agriculture exporter, but what a lot of people don't realize is that one in five spoonfuls of food in the U.S., 20% of our food is now imported to the U.S. So we have a huge it's like the ships are passing in the night,
Yeah.
Here come ships from Argentina, and here goes ships from us, and they're passing in the night. And so if these tariffs move forward, then a lot of consumption can be picked up domestically in the U.S. Goodness, 80% of organic grain sold in the U.S. is imported. 80%. So there's a massive market availability for domestic consumption if these things start to mess up with the export market.
Is it possible for America to be completely self-sufficient when it comes to agricultural products? The concern from some experts is that, well, if there were to be a hot war between the US and its adversaries, let's suppose there is a war between China and the US. Well, we can't be importing food from China. So which Chinese exports of food products can be grown in the US?
So probably Americans, yes, there's no question in my mind that America can be completely food self-sufficient. Goodness, we have 35 million acres of lawn and 36 million acres growing feed and housing recreational horses. That's 71 million acres that could produce all of our food and berries.
Yeah.
Maybe not our livestock, but everything else could be produced basically on recreational horse farms and lawns in America. So can we be food self-sufficient? Absolutely, but it means that there would be more participants and there would be a much more integrated system rather than a segregated system. That's what we have right now and why it is so inefficient. As soon as you start integrating, then everything becomes much more efficient.
How would you, let's say, recommend the Department of Agriculture to make improvements to the agricultural sector in the coming 4 years, Joel?
Well, the most important thing it could do is take the shackles off of entrepreneurial cottage industry farmers. The power of small farmers by the thousands is definitely a force to be reckoned with, versus the power of the great big conglomerates. The big conglomerates now, of course, rule the day. They get all the press. They get the
Mm-hmm.
all the interest. But worldwide, um, more food is actually produced by small farmers than large
Yes.
farmers worldwide. And so the only reason that farms have become so huge in the U.S. Is due to food regulations that make it very, very difficult for small outfits to access the market. Our food regulations are scale prejudicial. They discriminate inordinately against smaller producers. So if you took those shackles off and freed up those small producers to access their neighborhoods, there are thousands of entrepreneurs ready to do that if the freedom were granted. So, in my view, what we actually the thing that would revitalize America's domestic food economy would be a freedom to sell, a freedom to market that we haven't seen for a long, long time.
Well, you've been critical of the slogans "Make America Healthy Again." You wrote on your this is your I think your post here.
Yes.
Make America Healthy Again is hard to defend when in 1800 only half of all babies born in America did not reach 5 years old. We're referring to, of course, Donald Trump's new health slogan, Make America Healthy Again, I guess in conjunction with Make America Great Again. The agricultural the Make Agriculture Great Again implies that America at one time had great agriculture, but the truth is that from day one, American agriculture exploited nature and damaged ecology. All of these are problems that have made me reluctant to even say them. So tell me what you mean by this post, Joel, and why America was not a great agriculture nation in its founding days.
Oh, well, the story of America's agriculture ecology is horrendous. I mean, we've dropped our organic matter from an average of about 8% down to about 1.5%. And organic matter, of course, is what holds water and feeds soil microbiology. We've taken in many areas, like where I live, we've taken basically 3 feet of topsoil, and it's all washed away. Certainly along the Mid-Atlantic seaboard, the eastern U.S., east of the Mississippi, and so our aquifers are depleting. I mean, we've dropped the Ogallala aquifer, which gives the irrigation water to about 5 states in the Midwest, has dropped more than 100 feet in 50 years, and it's still continuing to drop every year. And so American agriculture has been largely exploitive and not regenerative, or whatever word you want to call it. And so we have done a lot of damage. Our agriculture success has essentially been created on the back of a legacy fertility that was created over millennia prior to the prior to Europeans coming here. And so, and so now, as we have exploited these fertilities, where do you go from here? I mean, we now have a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico. So all those fisheries and shrimp and crab and all those fisheries are now gone as a direct result of American chemical runoff. So and America is not we could argue, is this the worst country in the world on this trajectory? I can't answer that question, but I can tell you that that historically, I'm not sure a culture has ever done this degree of devastation ecologically this fast and turned it into cash as the U.S. has.
What could be done in terms of new farming practices, Joel? What can be done to protect the ecology while also expanding the food supply healthily, sustainably?
Sure, sure. It's a great question, and thank you for asking it. So, the first thing to do is to have an integrated food supply. So that, I mean, food scraps should all go through chickens. In fact, when Pat Foreman wrote her book City Chicks, she said that if 1 in 3 American households had enough chickens to eat their kitchen scraps, there would not be an egg industry in the U.S. And so there should be, chickens behind restaurants. There should be chicken behind school cafeterias. So there should be an integrated system. Milk processors that make yogurt and butter and cottage cheese and have whey. Should go into pigs like it does in Austria and in Switzerland. So you know roughly 85% of everything that we've put in landfills in America is compostable. 85%, and some 40% of it is edible. And so if the edible goes into chickens, for example, and maybe some pigs, and the carbon becomes compostable, then suddenly you begin developing an integrated system rather than segregated. On our farm, for example, we have a chipper, so we buy no fertilizer. So when Putin invaded Ukraine and fertilizer jumped 400%, it didn't matter to us at all because we don't buy any of the fertilizer. But what we do have is a very large chipper that we can chip crooked and junky trees to do large scale composting, and that becomes our fertilizer. So, again, this is an in situ carbon development. Right now, America spends $5 billion fighting fires from crooked dead trees out west that ought to be composted so that we can actually grow soil and grow earthworms. These are very, very simple systems, but so far we have subsidized or encouraged a non-integrated approach.
Well, I think the Make America Healthy Again slogan may refer to not just the ecology of farming, but also the actual health of the nation's population. Take a look at some of these stats here that are on this website, USA Facts. So, how have obesity rates changed over time? In the early 1960s, roughly 13% of people were considered obese by the CDC guidelines. Recent figures suggest that our current national obesity rate is closer to 43%. In addition, and here's a chart showing this, in addition, nearly 10% of all Americans were morbidly obese during the 2017-2018 survey compared to less than 1% in the 1960 to 62 era. Childhood obesity rates also tripled from 5% in the early 70s to more than 19% by March 2020. And you can
Yeah,
see here the blue line here, severe obesity
right.
changing over time, over the decades. This is, of course, not just an issue of national health, but an issue of economic growth as well. An unhealthy nation is an unproductive one. So how could what? So I think when Trump is saying "Make America Healthy Again," he may or may not be referring to or return to, these days here when less of the nation has health issues. And of course, as you know, heart disease is the number one cause of natural death. So anyway, how do we go back to this? What should be done to the food supply?
Well, the first thing to do is get the government out of the food business.
Mm,
Everything that the government tells us to eat is bad. I mean, the USDA has just come out with a statement that that Cheerios and Fruit Loops are more nutritious than beef. And so when you have that kind of language from the government, it's absurd and drives people. In fact, you can overlay. Yeah, these charts you're showing, David, are
yeah,
fantastic
I put them
because
back.
they show the decline of health in America. America now leads the world in non-infectious chronic morbidity. That's not a place to be number one, and so a lot of this is caused because America. Think about what the U.S. brought to the world. We brought genetically modified organisms to the world. We brought seed oil, consuming seed oils, margarines, Crisco to the world. We brought DDT to the world. We brought McDonald's to the world. I mean, the things that America has brought to the world as a mechanistic view of biology of life as a mechanical thing are absolutely what has created these things. And so the Make America Healthy agenda is not, yes, I agree with you. It's not just about farmland. It's primarily about people's health in that we need to restore the soil and
Mm,
restore nutrient dense food, get the chemicals out of the food, the additives out of the food. I mean, goodness, here's a great little stat for you. Right now, the our supplemental nutrition assistance program, SNAP, which used to be food stamps,
hmm
which is supposed to help poor people to be able to get better food. 10% of that SNAP budget, I'm sorry, $9 billion a year goes to Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, high fructose sugary drinks in a program that pays for nutrition. Not only are those high fructose corn syrup carbonated drinks not nutritious, they are deadly from a health standpoint. And so these are the kinds of things that the Make America Healthy again agenda, I think, will begin to address.
Look, I'm a free markets guy. I believe in letting the markets decide what's best for people. It's one thing to make the food supply healthier, more accessible, but if McDonald's are available and the Wendy's are available in every block, and the market votes to go there, who am I to judge, right? My
Oh,
point is, yeah,
absolutely, and I'm absolutely a libertarian as well, and
yeah,
so I'm not suggesting that we should shut them down or regulate them or
yeah,
anything like that. I'm just saying let's quit subsidizing and
mm,
incentivizing the negative. Get the government completely out of the
sure.
food business. Eliminate crop insurance. Eliminate subsidies, and let the market develop the way it will develop. It should be obvious to anybody looking at these charts you've put up. I've seen them, all my life. And it should be obvious that America would actually be healthier if the government had never told us what to eat.
Interesting. Has there been a major shift over the last, well, I guess there has been, but what has been the major shift in consumption patterns between of the regular person or the regular household over the last 60, 70 years that has led to this rapid increase in obesity rates? I mean, we went from 13% to 40% of the nation now labeled obese. So what have they changed in their diet is my question.
Well, the main thing is the consumption of grains and vegetable oils.
Hmm So
crackers,
contrary to popular belief, it's not
crackers,
junk
chips.
food consumption. It's not sodas. It's not Coca-Cola. It's not,
Well,
Wendy's burgers.
it's all the above. It's all
Okay.
the above. And so the consumption has moved from and ultra processed. That's the big one. It has moved from unprocessed, single ingredient things. Where people cook potatoes at home and cooked the chicken at home, and it's moved to highly ultra processed, breaded, with lots of calories and sugars and grease and hydrogenated vegetable oils. I mean, that's where I mean, we've exchanged. For decades, we exchanged butter and lard for hydrogenated vegetable oils. That is deadly in the human gut. We've exchanged omega-3 for omega-6s. I mean, those are nutritionally devastating. And so the obesity epidemic is traceable directly to the food pyramid of 1979, which put cookies and crackers on the bottom and put meat up at the top.
The issue of the government getting into the decision of what people should and should not eat extends to meat. Let me just read this article here from The Hill. So last year at the UN Climate Change Conference in Dubai, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, released a report on how climate action can transform agriculture and ensure nutritional security. In DC, the report highlights a contentious issue with a common sense conclusion. Factory farming extends basically that says for the US to live up to its climate commitments, it must stop subsidizing factory farming. Meanwhile, the US Farm Bill spends billions to make high emissions meat cheap for consumers and profitable for factory farms. There's also this movement of encouraging people to eat less meat because farming is bad for the environment, some environmentalists claim. So let's just evaluate these assumptions here. Factory farming leads to more climate change, and we should eat less meat if we want to meet our climate change goals.
So, yeah, that's a difficult nuance to unwrap very rapidly. But let me just say that again, factory farming is highly segregated. So you confine animals in one spot, you bring all the feedstocks in, you haul the manure out, and you've got all these animals confined in a spot, typically getting either an mRNA or some sort of typical vaccine and an antibiotic to keep them alive because of fecal particulate respiratory issues. And so if you spread this all out across the landscape, like on our farm, we have our livestock running like they did pre-European.
Mm,
We move the cows every day, we move the chickens every day, we move the turkeys every day, we move the pigs every couple of days. So they're constantly on new ground, and they're not concentrated in one spot at
sure.
these massive rates. And the result is that an animal is actually like a compost pile on steroids. Compost piles. I think everybody would agree those are good things. Compost pile is good. But it's a little bit tricky. You got to have the right microbes, temperature, moisture, all these things. Whereas in an animal, the temperature's always right, the microbes are always right, and an animal does in 24 hours what a compost pile might have to take 3 months to do. And so an animal is a recycler, is a massive, wonderful recycler that emits a wonderful blessing on the landscape. But it's a blessing if it's done in a pattern that's consistent with natural platforms like we see
Hmm.
Serengeti and things like that, versus a curse when it over excretes onto the ecological nest. And so a lot of our problem is not the number of animals, it's the confinement segregated concept that puts too many in one spot at one time.
Well, no doubt that the food that your farm produces could be healthier than a factory farm, but is your farming practice scalable for a very, very large nation?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, at our farm, we're producing 3 times the county average in beef on the same land. Again, because we move them every day, and we're mimicking these natural patterns like the bison and the wildebeest and these other herbivores around the planet. Our chickens are absolutely on pasture on the same land that the cows are on. So we're stacking complementary enterprises on the same acre rather than segregate. This will be an acre for apples. This will be an acre for asparagus. This will be for chickens, and this will be for cows. We actually combine them all so that you have symbiosis between the animals and the plants. So you actually get 1 + 1 = 3. That's the beauty of this kind of system. But our current orthodoxy is, well, you can't combine anything. We've got to have the apples over here, the cows over here, the pigs over here. Nothing is combined, and as a result, it's extremely inefficient due to its segregative capacity.
Let's talk about another contentious issue, which is the deportation of illegal immigrants, which is one of Trump's agendas. So, suppose, I'm not saying all farming is done by illegal immigrants, but suppose some of the labor leaves the farming sector of the U.S. Now, would that put pressure on the farming sector to either higher cost wages, which could push farming or farming produce up, or it could just produce a shortage of labor, which means less output in supply? Is this even a concern for you?
Well, it's not a concern for me because we use all legal labor, which by the way we pay way more,
Yeah.
so our wages are way higher, which is part of why our food cost is a little bit higher. But it's all legal. But you are exactly right. If there is a massive deportation, A, it will raise food prices, and B, the big industrial food whatever outfits will cry foul because they're put at a because it will impact their supply. But just for the record, let me tell you, I'm also opposed to all government welfare. And if we eliminated all government welfare, suddenly there would be a lot of Americans wanting to work
Mhm.
that currently aren't working, and that would give another opportunity. So it's not just a win lose. There's other elements. And if we eliminated all welfare, then we could drop our taxes and people could afford to spend more for food because they wouldn't be carrying a bunch of people that are too lazy to work. So those are realities.
Well, just based on your research and looking around, how would you evaluate the supply of labor for farmers across America? Are there enough farmers right now to meet growing food demand?
So um, it's such an interesting question because we have roughly a hundred applicants for 11 spots every year here to learn for young people to learn how to farm. So I actually think that if we had a more conducive climate to entrepreneurial farmers being able to make a living on the farm without all this regulatory intervention, that we would see a lot more young people coming to farms. I mean, to say right now, do we have enough farmers to do this? I would say no, we don't. But that can change very rapidly if suddenly farming became a viable, a more viable vocation because the intervention of the regulatory climate allowed entrepreneurial, more market access, to what you produce, what you do, and in your business. So I think it's a kind of which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you reduce welfare and reduce taxes and reduce government intervention and watch everything develop? That's the approach that I would take.
I want to close off and talking about globalization and what many economists that I've spoken to, at least, claim is the reversal of globalization happening now, or actually it has been happening over this last couple of years. As you're aware, Joel, food has become more accessible from faraway places, right? Now we can buy a banana from, from Latin America. We can buy fruits from Asia. These things weren't accessible many, many years ago when we didn't have global trade. If the world were to embrace more protectionism, which is to say less trade, more tariffs, more barriers to trade, could we not see a reversal in our living standards when it comes to food diversity, perhaps even a rise in prices of some food items that would have to be sourced locally versus cheaply from abroad?
Oh, absolutely. That would be an inevitable result. The question is, overall, from a cultural civilization standpoint, would it be a bad thing? I mean, just 40 years ago, Americans spent 18% of their income on food and 9% on healthcare. Today, we spend 18% of our income on healthcare and 9% on food. I find it interesting that those two numbers have what's so specifically inverted, over 40 years. And so I would much rather spend 18% and stay healthy and not require health care than pay 9% and have a bunch of chronic disease problems like we do in the US.
Well, you mentioned that there should be fewer or less regulation on the food industry, but if we have just capitalism running on its own, I'm just playing devil's advocate. If you just let the economy, laissez-faire, do its own thing with suppose no regulation, what we could have in theory is a bunch of greedy corporations making cheap food but unhealthy food, and over time you will have a unhealthier population because the market will always choose what is the most affordable because most people aren't health experts like yourself.
Well, people will become health experts when their decisions actually have ramifications. Right now, we have government-supported health care and a lot of regulations within the healthcare industry. If you eliminated the quote unquote safety net, which is a dubious safety net at best, if you eliminate the safety net, then suddenly people will say, you know what, I think I'd better think about what I eat so I don't get sick because I'm going to have to pay for my own health care. I mean, these are dominoes that naturally fall through, and I would suggest that the way to create more responsible decision making among people is to make them responsible for the decisions that they make. And when the government comes in with taxpayer funded or deficit spending funded things, so that people can make crazy and stupid decisions or convenience decisions or irresponsible decisions and be cared for, then they tend to make more stupid decisions. And so I think that while that possibility of a bunch of cheap food and big conglomerates developing could be, I don't know of any monopoly or any oligarchy that occurs when there's a true marketplace accessibility for innovators and entrepreneurs. The only reason that we have concentrated food systems is because there are concessionary offerings in the regulatory climate, the revolving door kind of thing, that enables the big outfits to get concessionary standards above the prejudicial ones meted out to smaller scale competition.
So ultimately, what should Americans do to make themselves healthier? Forget the government making America healthy again. What should Americans do to make themselves healthier again? On the one hand, you mentioned the U.S. Department of Agriculture has been putting out information that may not be the best. Now, the conglomerates, the McDonald's, may not have our interest as their number one. May not have our
Yeah.
health in their interest, is what I'm trying to say. So, what should Americans do? How should we educate ourselves in making us healthy and choose the right sources of food?
Yeah. So the first thing is to get in your kitchen, develop domestic culinary arts. You cannot have an integrity or authentic food system and be this profoundly ignorant about food. And so you get butternut squash, not canned butternut squash with red dye 29 in it from the supermarket. You actually use your kitchen. And the beautiful thing, David, is that never before has this kind of domestic culinary arts been easier. I mean, we've got Instapots, time bake, hot and cold running water, refrigerators. I mean, great grandma would have given her eye teeth to have the kind of conveniences that we have in our kitchen. So it's never been easier to cook from scratch. And so we need to, quit trying to follow the Kardashians on TikTok and take that time and interest and start putting it on our authentic food. So that's one thing. Another one is that you can do something yourself, even if it's a quart jar sprouting mung beans on the windowsill. There is something that you can do yourself to touch, to viscerally touch and participate in in real food. And then the third thing, this is my three-part recipe: do something, cook yourself, do something yourself, and then research yourself. Turn off Netflix and start surfing some websites. Take your recreation entertainment budget. Don't go to the movies. Go to a local farm and become a participant in this great game of health, life, and food and agriculture.
Well, let's hope we follow that advice. I'll speak from personal experience. Um, Look, I agree with you 100%. I know what the right thing should be, but sometimes I just get lazy. I live downtown Vancouver, and there's A&W just down the street, and Costco's 3 miles away. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's
and
it's
this is the
it's
problem here, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you will make those changes when you decide they're worth making. That's the you know that's true for all of us. All of
Yeah.
us we become intentional about what we actually
Yeah.
what we actually determine for whatever reason is important to be intentional about. We tend to be successful at what we put attention on.
That's a very good. If nothing else, listen to that. Thank you very much, Joel. Where can we learn more from you? Where can we follow your work?
Sure. My website is Polyface Farms, Polyface, polyfacefarms.com. And by the way, we do ship nationwide. Every Tuesday and Wednesday from our farm, we ship food directly all across the U.S. So it's never been easier to get it. It goes right to your doorstep. It's never been more possible. And our kitchens let us do it well. So yeah, Polyface Farms is me. I have a blog, Musings from the Lunatic Farmer, which David, you obviously pulled up there a little bit ago, and be glad to interact with anybody. And it's just been a delight and a privilege to enjoy your astute and precise questions again.
Oh, that credits to my team for helping me with these questions, but thank you very much for giving us astute answers to my questions. We'll speak again soon, I'm sure. Follow Joe in the links down below, and see you next time. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.